The city skyline glittered like a sea of stars, casting its golden glow over the glass windows of the exclusive penthouse suite. The air was thick with the scent of expensive liquor and the faint trace of cologne that clung to the sheets. Sienna groaned as the first rays of morning light pierced through the sheer curtains, forcing her eyes open. Her head throbbed, her body ached in unfamiliar places, and as she shifted, the warmth beside her sent a chill down her spine. Slowly, hesitantly, she turned her head. Lying beside her, half covered by the silk sheets, was a man. Not just any man. Leon Arden, the most powerful, ruthless businessman in the city. The billionaire whose mere presence could silence a room. The man she had spent years avoiding at all costs. Her breath hitched as she scrambled out of bed, clutching the sheet to her chest. Her mind was a blur, fragments of last night flashing before her. The heated gazes, the intoxicating pull of his deep voice, the way his hands had felt on her skin. No. This couldn't be real. She grabbed her dress, shaking fingers trying to pull it over her head as she backed toward the door. She had to leave before he woke up, before. Running away? The deep, husky voice froze her in place. Sienna's heart pounded as she turned to see Leon sitting up, the sheets pooling around his waist, exposing his perfectly sculpted torso. His dark eyes locked onto her, unreadable yet intense. I have to go, she stammered. A slow, knowing smirk curled his lips. Go ahead, Sienna. But don't forget, you came to me last night. Her pulse roared in her ears as she fled the suite, telling herself it was just a mistake. Just one night. But weeks later, when the pregnancy test turned positive, she realized Leon Arden was about to ruin her life all over again. Sienna stood in front of the bathroom mirror, gripping the white stick in her trembling hands. The two pink lines stared back at her, undeniable proof that her life had just taken a turn she wasn't prepared for. Her stomach twisted. Pregnant. She swallowed hard, her thoughts spiraling. She had been careful, hadn't she? But that night, she had been reckless, and now she was paying the price. Leon Arden's child. The weight of it crushed her. The man was ruthless, untouchable, and powerful enough to make her life a living nightmare if he wanted to. No, she whispered, shaking her head. She could do this on her own. She didn't need him. She didn't want him. But fate had other plans. Sienna had barely stepped out of the small clinic when she felt the presence before she saw him. A sleek black car was parked by the curb, its tinted windows rolling down slowly. Her heart stopped. Leon Arden sat in the back seat, his sharp gaze locking onto hers like a predator who had finally found its prey. Get in, he ordered. Her fingers tightened around the paper bag, holding the test results. How did he know? I'm not doing this, she said, stepping back. Leon didn't move, but the air around him grew heavy with authority. Sienna. His voice was calm, but there was an edge to it, one that sent a chill down her spine. You're carrying my child. Her stomach twisted. It's none of your business. His jaw tightened. Everything about you is my business now. She turned to walk away, but the car door swung open, and in one swift move, Leon was in front of her. His towering frame blocked her path, his scent, clean, crisp, and undeniably male, flooding her senses. You don't get to make this decision alone, he murmured, his dark eyes scanning her face. Marry me? Sienna let out a bitter laugh. That's not happening. Leon's gaze darkened, his fingers grazing her wrist in a touch that sent heat shooting through her veins. I wasn't asking. Her breath caught as realization sank in. Leon Arden wouldn't let her go. And no matter how hard she fought, she knew this was only the beginning. Sienna's heart pounded so hard it drowned out every sound around her. The city streets bustled with life, but all she could hear was Leon's voice. Marry me. The words clung to her skin like a curse, suffocating her. She yanked her wrist free from his light but firm grip, stepping back as if putting space between them could somehow erase the reality of her situation. No, she said, her voice steadier than she felt. You don't get to order me around, Leon. Leon's expression didn't change, but something in his dark eyes flickered, a silent warning. You're carrying my child, Sienna. You think I'll let you raise my heir alone? His heir. Of course, that's what this was about. It wasn't about her. It wasn't about love. It wasn't even about wanting this child. It was about his name, his legacy, his control over everything and everyone around him. She let out a bitter laugh. I don't need your permission to raise my baby. Leon's eyes turned cold. I don't think you understand, he said smoothly. This isn't a negotiation. You will marry me. Sienna clenched her fists. And if I don't? Leon tilted his head slightly, studying her like she was an opponent on the chessboard he was about to corner. You don't want to find out, he said simply. A chill ran down her spine. He wasn't bluffing. Leon Arden was the most powerful man in the city, a man whose name alone sent shivers down the spines of businessmen and politicians alike. If he wanted to, he could ruin her life with a single phone call. She had seen it happen before. But she wouldn't be his puppet. I don't care what you say, Leon. She squared her shoulders. I'm not marrying you. I'll raise this child on my own. His jaw tightened, and for a brief moment, she saw something flash in his eyes, something dark, something possessive. Then, his lips curled into a slow, almost amused smirk. You're stubborn. I expected that. He took a step closer, and she instinctively stepped back, only to find herself trapped between his towering presence and the cold metal of the clinic's entrance door. Leon leaned in, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. You think you have a choice, but you don't. You will marry me, Sienna. Because if you don't, I will make sure you never set foot outside this city again. Her breath hitched. You wouldn't. Wouldn't I? He raised an eyebrow, his voice calm, controlled. I own this city, Sienna. Do you really think you can disappear from me? Her pulse raced. She wanted to deny it, wanted to call his bluff, but she knew better. Leon Arden never made empty threats. You can't force me, she whispered. Leon exhaled, his eyes locking onto hers with an intensity that made her stomach twist. I don't have to. He reached into his pocket, pulled out a folded document and held it up. Sienna's breath caught as she recognized what it was. A legal custody agreement. She snatched it from his hands and quickly skimmed through the lines. It was an official petition for full custody, his custody. If she refused to marry him, he was prepared to take her child away from her before it was even born. Her hands trembled. You're unbelievable. Leon's voice softened, but it was no less firm. I don't take risks when it comes to what's mine. She glared at him. I am not yours. His smirk deepened. Not yet. She wanted to slap him, to scream, to fight, but she knew none of it would matter. Leon wasn't someone she could overpower with emotions. He played by logic, by power, by control. And he was winning. Sienna sucked in a shaky breath. I need time to think. Leon studied her for a moment before nodding. You have 3 days. And just like that, he walked away, his long strides effortless, his presence suffocating even in his absence. Sienna watched the black car pull away, her fingers gripping the paper so tightly it crumpled. 3 days. 3 days to decide between losing her freedom or losing her child. Sienna spent the next 2 days in turmoil. She barely slept, barely ate, pacing her small apartment like a caged animal. She searched for solutions, for loopholes, but no matter what she thought of, it all came back to one unavoidable truth. Leon had already won. Her job barely covered her rent, let alone the expenses of a baby. She had no family, no powerful connections to fight him in court. If Leon truly wanted full custody, he would get it. And even if he didn't, he could still make her life a living hell. Her hands drifted to her stomach. She wasn't just fighting for herself anymore. She was fighting for her baby. And if marrying Leon was the only way to protect her child, then what choice did she really have? By the 3rd day, she was exhausted, physically, emotionally. But she had made her decision. She walked into Arden Enterprises with her heart lodged in her throat. The receptionist barely had time to acknowledge her before the glass elevator doors slid open, revealing Leon himself. Tall. Powerful. Completely in control, as always. He looked her over, his sharp eyes missing nothing. "You're here." Sienna forced herself to meet his gaze. "I'll do it," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Leon's lips curved into a knowing smirk. "Good." Before she could react, he stepped aside, gesturing toward the elevator. "Let's go." Her brows furrowed. "Where?" Leon's smirk didn't fade. "To get our marriage license." Sienna's breath caught. "What now?" Leon's expression remained unreadable. "Why wait?" Her fingers curled into fists. "You really had this plan, didn't you?" Leon didn't deny it. Instead, he leaned in slightly, his voice dropping to that dangerously smooth tone that sent shivers through her. "Sienna, you should know by now." He reached up, tucking a stray strand of hair behind her ear. "I always get what I want." Her pulse pounded, her stomach twisted, and she knew this was only the beginning of the nightmare. Sienna stared at Leon, her nails digging into her palms. "You expect me to marry you just like that? No discussion, no agreement, just, let's go?" Leon's smirk didn't waver. "You agreed, didn't you?" "I didn't agree to be dragged to a courthouse like some prisoner," she snapped. "Marriage isn't just some business deal." His eyes darkened. "No, it isn't. But for us, it's a necessity." Sienna swallowed hard. "For you, maybe. Not for me." Leon took a step closer, his presence overpowering. "You think I want this, Sienna?" His voice was quiet but firm, carrying an unmistakable weight. "You think I plan to marry someone I barely know?" She stiffened. "Then why force it?" Leon exhaled, his jaw tightening. "Because I don't take risks with what's mine." Sienna let out a humorless laugh. "You keep saying that. What's mine? Like I'm some possession." Leon's gaze remained unwavering. "Because you are." Her breath caught. He wasn't speaking in arrogance. He wasn't even trying to provoke her. He was simply stating a fact, a reality she had no control over. Sienna squared her shoulders. "You can't control me, Leon." His lips twitched, as if her defiance amused him. "Can't I?" She glared at him, her heart pounding. "If I sign that paper, if I become your wife, you don't own me." Leon reached up, tracing the edge of her jaw with the back of his fingers. It was a soft touch, almost tender, but laced with dominance. "No," he murmured, "but I will." Her stomach clenched. This was a game to him, a slow, calculated hunt, and she was the prey that had walked right into his trap. Sienna swallowed, trying to steady herself. "You said you don't take risks. Then you should know I'll never love you." Leon's expression remained unreadable, but his next words made her stomach drop. "I don't need your love, Sienna." He leaned in, his lips grazing her ear. "I just need your obedience." She shivered, a mixture of anger and something far more dangerous curling in her chest. "And if I refuse?" Leon pulled back slightly, his gaze locking onto hers. "Then I'll make you wish you hadn't." Her breath hitched. She wanted to believe she still had a choice, that she could fight this. But deep down, she knew Leon Arden always got what he wanted. And this time, what he wanted was her. Sienna sat in the passenger seat of Leon's sleek black car, her hands clenched together in her lap. The silence between them was thick, suffocating. She had expected him to take her to some grand estate or a private office to discuss the marriage further. Instead, the car smoothly pulled up in front of the civil affairs office. Her stomach dropped. She turned to him sharply. "You planned this." Leon unfastened his seatbelt with calm precision. "Of course." Her pulse pounded. "You didn't even give me a day to process this. You're just dragging me in here like I don't have a say?" Leon's dark eyes flicked to hers, cool and unyielding. "You had 3 days to think, Sienna. You made your choice." Her fingers curled into fists. "I never said I'd marry you today." Leon exhaled slowly, as if he was explaining something simple to a child. "Delaying won't change anything. The sooner we do this, the better." "For who?" she shot back. "You." Leon's expression remained unreadable. "For all of us." Sienna shook her head, pressing her back against the seat. I'm not ready. Leon leaned slightly toward her, his scent, clean, crisp, and utterly intoxicating, filling the car. His voice was low, calm, and dangerously persuasive. You think I'm ready? His gaze locked onto hers, unwavering. You think this is what I planned for my life? She opened her mouth to respond, but he continued. I didn't expect to have a child, Sienna. I didn't expect to be forced into marriage either. But here we are. His eyes darkened. You don't want to do this. I don't want to do this. But we will, because there is no other option. She hated how steady he was. How, no matter how much she resisted, he always had an answer. Her throat tightened. I don't belong in your world, Leon. Leon's lips curled slightly, his fingers brushing against hers in a touch so brief, she almost thought she imagined it. You do now. Before she could protest, he pushed open his door and stepped out. A moment later, the passenger door opened, and he extended a hand toward her. Come. Sienna stared at his outstretched hand, her heart pounding. She wanted to refuse, to slam the door shut and run. But where would she go? What would she do? This wasn't just about her anymore. Taking a shaky breath, she placed her hand in his. Leon's fingers wrapped around hers, firm and possessive, as he pulled her to her feet. He didn't let go as he led her toward the entrance of the office. As if he knew, once she walked inside, there was no turning back. The room was cold, sterile. The official across the desk barely glanced at them as he prepared the documents. Sienna sat stiffly beside Leon, her hands gripping the arms of the chair. Mr. Arden, the official said, flipping through the papers. Everything is in order. We just need the signatures. Leon picked up the pen without hesitation and signed his name in smooth, bold strokes. Then, he set the pen down in front of her. Sienna stared at it, her hands frozen in her lap. This was it. Once she signed, she would be Sienna Arden, the wife of a man who didn't love her, didn't care about her, only about control. Leon didn't rush her. He simply watched, waiting. Minutes passed. Sienna. His voice was low, patient, but there was an edge to it. A warning. Her throat tightened. This isn't fair. Leon tilted his head slightly. Fairness has nothing to do with this. She looked at him, then really looked at him. His expression was unreadable, but his eyes, they weren't completely devoid of emotion. There was something there, something unreadable. Did he hate this as much as she did? Did he hate her for forcing his hand? Her fingers trembled as she reached for the pen. She hesitated. Then, with a deep breath, she signed. The moment the ink dried, Leon took the paper and handed it back to the official. It's done, the man said, stamping the document. Sienna exhaled shakily, her chest tight. Leon turned to her, his gaze unreadable. Let's go home. She blinked. Home. His lips curved slightly. Our home. Her stomach twisted. She wasn't just his wife on paper. She was stepping into his world. His rules. His control. And there was no escape. Sienna stared out the car window as the city blurred past her. Leon's home wasn't just a house. It was a fortress. The black gates opened automatically as they approached, revealing an estate so grand it looked like it belonged in a royal family. Marble columns, sprawling gardens, a staff of people waiting at the entrance. Her fingers tightened around her dress. She didn't belong here. The car stopped and the door opened. Leon stepped out first, then turned back to her. Come. She hesitated. Leon didn't offer his hand this time. He didn't need to. She already knew there was no running now. She stepped out. The moment she crossed the threshold, she felt it, the finality of it. She was no longer Sienna, the struggling woman trying to survive. She was Sienna Arden, the wife of the most powerful man in the city. Leon walked ahead of her, expecting her to follow. And she did. But as she stepped into the grand foyer, one thought echoed in her mind. I've just walked into my own prison. The door shut behind her with a soft but final click. Sienna stood frozen in the grand foyer, her gaze sweeping over the high ceilings, the elegant chandeliers, and the cold, lifeless beauty of the mansion. It was stunning, but it wasn't home. Not for her. Leon removed his suit jacket and handed it to a waiting butler. His movements were precise, effortless, as if this was all just routine for him. For her, it was a cage. She took a slow breath. Where am I supposed to stay? Leon glanced at her, as if the question was unnecessary. In our room. Her stomach twisted. Our room. Leon's expression didn't change. We're married, Sienna. She crossed her arms, standing her ground. And that means I have to share a room with you? Leon took a step closer, his gaze locking onto hers. It means you don't get to run. Her pulse pounded. I'm not running. Good. His lips curved slightly, but the amusement didn't reach his eyes. Because there's nowhere to go. Her throat tightened. I'm not your prisoner. Leon exhaled softly, as if her resistance was exhausting.
No.
You're my wife. Sienna swallowed hard. And if I refuse? Leon's gaze darkened, his voice turning lower, softer, more dangerous. Then I'll remind you exactly who you belong to. A shiver ran down her spine, though she refused to show weakness. I'm not yours, Leon. His lips twitched. Not yet. Before she could fire back, an older woman approached them, her hands neatly clasped in front of her. Welcome home, Mrs. Arden, she said with a polite smile. Sienna stiffened. Mrs. Arden. The title sounded foreign. Unnatural. Leon turned to the woman. Prepare dinner. Yes, sir. She nodded and left. Leon returned his attention to Sienna. Come. She didn't move. Leon arched a brow. Or, do you need me to carry you? Her cheeks burned. I can walk. Then do it. With clenched fists, she followed him. Their room was more like a luxury suite. A massive bed, floor-to-ceiling windows, an entire lounge area, and a private balcony overlooking the city. But all Sienna saw was one bed. She turned sharply. I'm not sleeping with you. Leon unbuttoned the cuffs of his shirt, rolling them up his forearms. I didn't say you would. Her breath caught as she took in the sight of him. Damn him. Why did he have to look like that? Effortlessly powerful, effortlessly handsome. She quickly shook off the thought. Then I'll take the couch. Leon chuckled, low and deep. That's unnecessary. I don't care. She folded her arms. I'm not sleeping in the same bed as you. Leon studied her for a long moment, then shrugged. Suit yourself. Relief washed over her. Too soon. Of course, Leon added, his smirk growing. If you insist on sleeping elsewhere, I might have to personally make sure you're warm throughout the night. Her cheeks flamed. You. He took a step closer. I don't mind sharing, Sienna. His voice was smooth, teasing. But if you'd rather I hold you to keep you warm, I'm taking the couch. Leon chuckled again, satisfied, and walked past her toward the bathroom. Sienna let out a shaky breath. This man was impossible. She had to be careful. Because no matter how much she wanted to fight him, Leon Arden always won. Sienna curled up on the plush couch, arms wrapped around herself. The mansion was silent, but the weight of what had just happened pressed down on her. She was married. To a man who didn't love her. To a man who forced her into this. She clenched her fists. This wasn't how her life was supposed to turn out. The sound of running water came from the bathroom, and she exhaled sharply. She needed to think, to figure out her next move. But just as she was about to close her eyes, the bathroom door opened. Leon stepped out, the top buttons of his shirt undone, his sleeves still rolled up. His hair was slightly damp, making him look even more devastatingly handsome. Sienna quickly looked away.
No.
She wasn't going to be affected by him. Leon glanced at her position on the couch, amusement flickering in his dark eyes. Comfortable. Perfectly, she replied without looking at him. He smirked. Suit yourself. Without another word, he climbed into bed. Sienna turned to face the couch's backrest, forcing her breathing to slow. But even as she tried to relax, she could feel his presence. She hated this. She wasn't free. She wasn't safe. And the worst part? Leon Arden was far too dangerous to ignore. The next morning, Sienna woke up feeling stiff. The couch was luxurious, but it wasn't meant for sleeping. Every muscle in her body ached. She groaned softly, stretching. Regretting your choice? Her eyes snapped open. Leon stood near the bed, adjusting the cuffs of his shirt, already dressed for the day. Sienna sat up, rubbing her neck.
No.
His smirk told her he didn't believe her. Get ready. We're going out. She frowned. Going out where? Leon buttoned his suit jacket. You're my wife now. It's time people see you as such. Her stomach twisted. I'm not your trophy to show off. Leon's gaze darkened. He took a slow step toward her, closing the distance. You are my wife, he said, his voice low, controlled. And that means you stand by my side. Sienna's heart pounded. I didn't agree to be paraded around like some obedient wife. Leon leaned in slightly, his presence overwhelming. Then you should have thought twice before carrying my child. She sucked in a sharp breath. You have 1 hour, he added before walking out of the room. Sienna clenched her fists. She had no choice. But that didn't mean she had to make it easy for him. The car pulled up in front of an exclusive restaurant, where photographers and reporters were already waiting. Sienna swallowed hard. Leon stepped out first, the cameras flashing instantly. He turned, offering her his hand. She hesitated. His dark eyes locked onto hers. A silent warning. Sienna forced herself to take his hand. The moment she did, Leon's grip tightened, guiding her effortlessly out of the car. The cameras went wild. Mr. Arden, is this your new wife? How long have you two been together? Mrs. Arden, is it true you married because of the pregnancy? Sienna stiffened. Leon remained calm, his arm wrapping around her waist. He leaned down, his lips dangerously close to her ear. Smile. Her stomach clenched. She forced a small smile, knowing that the world was watching. This wasn't just a meal. This was Leon's way of telling everyone she belonged to him. Inside, the restaurant was quiet, the noise of the reporters fading behind the thick walls. Sienna exhaled shakily. You could have warned me about that circus outside. Leon smirked. I did.
She glared.
No, you ordered me to come. His smirk deepened. Same thing. Her jaw tightened. This man was impossible. As they sat, a waiter quickly approached. Mr. Arden, it's an honor to have you here. And Mrs. Arden, welcome. Sienna stiffened at the title. Leon glanced at the menu. We'll have the usual. Sienna frowned. I didn't even order yet. Leon's gaze flicked to her. You don't like my choice? She folded her arms. Maybe I want to choose for myself. Leon leaned back, his expression unreadable. Go ahead. Sienna lifted the menu. A small victory. But as she looked at the list of items, most of which she couldn't even pronounce, her confidence wavered. Leon watched, completely at ease. Problem. She gritted her teeth. No. The waiter cleared his throat. Mrs. Arden, would you like a recommendation? Sienna swallowed her pride. Yes, please. Leon chuckled softly. Smart choice. She shot him a glare, but he only looked amused. This was going to be a long marriage. After lunch, Leon took her to one of the most exclusive boutiques in the city. Sienna folded her arms. Why are we here? Leon gave her a pointed look. You need clothes. She scowled. I have clothes. Not ones that fit your new status. Her jaw tightened. I don't need you dressing me up like some doll. Leon smirked. I never said you were a doll. He leaned in slightly, his voice dropping. But you are mine. Sienna's breath hitched. Before she could argue, a team of assistants surrounded her, pulling her into the fitting rooms. Leon watched, satisfied. She could fight all she wanted. But Sienna Arden belonged to him now. And he wasn't letting her go. Days turned into weeks. Sienna fought Leon at every turn, refusing to let him control her completely. But no matter how hard she resisted, Leon always had the upper hand. Until everything changed. One evening, Sienna overheard a conversation she wasn't supposed to. Are you sure? Leon's voice was sharp, dangerously low. Yes, sir. There have been threats against Mrs. Arden. Sienna's heart stopped. Threats? Against her? She pressed her back against the wall, her breath unsteady. Leon was silent for a long moment. Then, double her security. I don't want a single thing happening to her. Her chest tightened.
Why?
Why did he care so much if all of this was just a forced arrangement? That night, Leon came home late. Sienna sat by the window, watching the city lights. She didn't turn when she heard him enter. You knew. Leon sighed. You shouldn't have been listening. She clenched her fists. Why didn't you tell me? I didn't want you to worry. She turned to face him. I should have a say in my own safety, Leon.
His jaw tightened.
Your safety is my responsibility. Sienna shook her head. This isn't just about safety. You act like you own me. Leon closed the distance between them. Because I do. Her breath hitched. No, you don't. His hand came up, brushing against her cheek. Then why haven't you left? She froze. Why hadn't she? Was it just the baby? Or was it something more? The threats grew more serious. One night, someone tried to break into the estate. Sienna woke up to the sound of gunfire. Leon was already out of bed, his gun drawn. Stay here, he ordered. Fear gripped her, but she grabbed his arm. Be careful. His eyes softened for the first time. He cupped her cheek, his thumb grazing her skin. I always am. Then he was gone. Sienna's heart pounded. She wasn't sure when everything had changed. But suddenly, Leon's safety mattered to her. The attack was dealt with swiftly, but the message was clear. Someone wanted Leon dead, and they didn't care if they had to go through Sienna to get to him. Leon tightened security, but it wasn't enough. Sienna could see the tension in his shoulders, the exhaustion in his eyes. One evening, as they sat in silence, she finally spoke. I'm not leaving. Leon stilled. What? She took a deep breath. I know you wanted to control me. And maybe, at first, I hated you for it. But I don't want to leave anymore. Leon's expression was unreadable. Then, he reached for her, pulling her into his arms. You were never leaving, Sienna. His voice was low, possessive. Not then.
Not now.
Not ever. For the first time, she didn't fight him. She let him hold her, because maybe, just maybe, she wanted to stay. Months later, Sienna gave birth to a beautiful baby girl. Leon held their daughter in his arms, his usual cold expression replaced by something softer, something only she got to see. Sienna watched him, her heart full. She had fought this marriage, fought him, but in the end, she had fallen in love with the man who refused to let her go. Leon looked at her, his dark eyes locking onto hers. Marry me again. Sienna laughed softly. We're already married. This time, Leon murmured, let it be your choice. Tears burned in her eyes. She cupped his face, pressing her forehead against his. Yes. And for the first time, Sienna Arden truly belonged to him.